Hey there, my name is Alex. I am the Silver Mont, and the wind is pushing me because Dragon's Dogma 2 was recently announced. After all these years, after all this time, we've finally become Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, as you may or may not be aware, I am a huge fan of Dragon's Dogma. This is the one game announcement I've been hoping for. Every E3 that comes, I go, can we get Dragon's Dogma 2? Now, of course, there was a while, oh, how about Devil May Cry 5? But we got Devil May Cry 5. And now we got Dragon's Dogma 2. Of course, as of right now, we have, well, virtually nothing to go by. At time of writing, and time of reading this out, we know nothing other than it is in development. So, we'll talk in this video a little about what we might expect to see, or hope to see, in a sequel, as well as some of the things that could be improved from the first game. Dragon's Dogma came out in 2012 and quickly became one of my favourite games, but that isn't to say it's perfect. In fact, Dragon's Dogma has a lot of issues, yet it had so much potential, and that's why I wanted a sequel. Back then, when I was playing Dark Souls and Dragon's Dogma a lot, if you'd asked me which one I wanted a sequel for, I'd say Dragon's Dogma. 10 years on, and we've had Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring, and many other games in that style. Whilst I've enjoyed most, if not all of them, I never really felt that Dark Souls needed a sequel. Like, Dark Souls was really good. Sure, there were some issues with it, but for the most part I was really happy with that game, and I didn't beat it and go, wow, I need a sequel. It was, and remains, a great game. Yeah, there's things to improve, but with Dragon's Dogma, a sequel has been needed for a long time to hammer out the flaws and polish that which worked. It was a very ambitious game. It was like their first big open world JRPG action RPG thing, so I understand that there were problems with it. So first up, let's talk about what worked in Dragon's Dogma. The general gameplay loop is great. It's an action RPG with strong emphasis on action. The different classes all have distinct feels, even if some of them share certain tools. But playing as an archer in Dragon's Dogma feels very different from playing melee or a mage, compared to, well, Dark Souls, a game I love, but those games are by and large melee games where you can also shoot some projectiles. The class and vocation system in Dragon's Dogma is really good. Every one has awesome skills and flavour. I like pretty much every vocation. Then we have the aesthetic. Dragon's Dogma uses a classic fantasy look. I think they did a great job with it. Sure, you might look at the griffin and think, oh, that's just the most generic design ever. But I can still instantly tell which monsters are from Dragon's Dogma if you show me some screenshots, or maybe even concept art. Dungeons & Dragons obviously plays a big inspiration, and I love the design of the world and monsters. It's so refreshingly simple and fantasy-ish. They didn't go, oh, well, our dragon is not actually a dragon, it's actually like a worm that one day fell into some lava and sprouted lava wings, and now that's why they call it a worm, or whatever. It's just, they're just dragons. Classic fantasy dragons. The sense of adventure was top-notch too. It felt like a real adventure, planning out journeys from Grand Soren to, I don't know, the Great Wall, or that tower on the other side of the kingdom. Being out at night meant stronger enemies and almost pitch-black darkness, making the lanterns and oil very important. Then with the pawn, the party system. The pawns were AI-guided teammates who became very notorious for their eccentricities. But it was a lot of fun to shape your pawn. I'm still rather proud of my fighter on the PC platform who has great knowledge for most situations. He can carry a lot of stuff, and generally he's a great help. I think he's really good. Like, if a skeleton comes up, he will bash the hell out of it and just smash it into bits with his shield. And of course, Dragon's Dogma had some cool story and set-piece moments. The game's writing and plot are very, well, they're hit or miss, they're love it or hate it. I enjoyed it a lot, and comparing a big boss battle, well, it's a lot more fun to climb onto a dragon and stab it in the heart than, just bonking its ankles until it falls over. 10 years on, I don't think I've really played any games that have handled a breadth of combat better. Funnily enough, the kind of nearest comparisons I can think of would be like Monster Hunter. Because Monster Hunter, you're fighting all different sizes of enemies and all the playstyles are quite unique and distinct and, well, yeah, maybe heavy bowguns are a bit OP, but that's neither here nor there. But finally we have the music. Dragon's Dogma has some great music in my opinion. But how about what doesn't work. Indeed, I can rather bring up most of the same points in some ways. The gameplay loop, whilst the combat is fun, there's definitely problems with it. Whilst fighting giant monsters is great, sometimes fighting more regular-sized human enemies isn't nearly so smooth. That's something they could work on for a sequel, but it's partially understandable. It's the classic Witcher problem. The way you swing your sword at a human enemy is not necessarily the same way you would swing it at a monster. Having the same animation for both can be strange. Then we have the vocations. Whilst they work fine for the most part, developing them could be strange at times. For starters, Warrior only had 3 skills, which was unfortunate. Then we have the stat system. Let's say you level up as a mage in the game, you'll get stats for a mage, but then if you swap to a warrior, you're still going to have mage stats. This isn't a huge problem, especially because the endgame items have such comical amounts of stats on them that it's not really going to impact you too much. But it's still something that could easily be changed for a sequel, because min-maxing shouldn't really involve, well, oh, I want to play 200 levels as a sorcerer just so my Mystic Knight has maxed out attack, you know? There's got to be a better way to do it. It's something that could easily be changed for a sequel. That segs nicely into, well, vocations and loadouts. If you swapped vocation, you need to do a whole lot of management to swap things about. It would be nice if we could save gear sets. And if items were more stat-based, well, I mean, they're already pretty stat-based, then we wouldn't need to worry about trying out a warrior for 50 levels and then swapping to a mage and having a lot of magic attack. Maybe just get rid of the thing where you get certain stats upon leveling up, or let us choose them, or I don't know, maybe every time you level up, some points go into a crystal, and then you can use that crystal to allocate your stats, but then anytime you want, you can put the stats back into the crystal and reallocate them. I'm just saying random nonsense, but hopefully you get the idea. Truth be told, the user experience or user interface is one of the big things that needs working on for a sequel. General inventory and item management could be a lot better. I mentioned about, vocation loadouts and stuff, and I expect they're going to want to give us a far more streamlined experience that results in a smoother time in combat and out of it. Take healing and items for example. In Dragon's Dogma you need to bring up an inventory to use healing or other consumables, which feels strange to do in combat to me. Item shortcuts would work a lot better. If we can queue up a certain amount of items, give us a radial wheel like in Monster Hunter. I'd rather have that than the queue-based system of, say, Dark Souls, but I would accept that too. And actually, come to think of it, Monster Hunter has both a queue system and a radial wheel. Best of both worlds, huh? Speaking of Dark Souls, if there's one thing I would take from Dark Souls and put in Dragon's Dogma, it's the healing system. See, Dark Souls 1, the Estus system, is one of the best things about that game. It is like the perfect healing system, in my opinion. Of course, I'm fine with keeping some healing items as well, but I think having some sort of special magical potion that replenishes would be a great boon. You obviously just need to balance it around the game being an open world game. Make it so you can replenish it at inns and taverns and cities, and maybe certain points out in the wild as well. Then there's the pawns. Whilst the improvements to be made there are mostly the kind of thing that just come from better technology, I'm of the camp that believes we should have co-op in the game. There seems to be a rather divisive issue, as some people seem to think co-op would ruin it. I'm not really sure why though, so if you think co-op would ruin Dragon's Dogma, please do tell me why, because from my perspective, if you want to do co-op, you can do co-op, and if you don't want to do co-op, you can just play by yourself, like with a normal regular party, right? But if we had the option to either play with another player plus their pawn for, say, 2 Arisen 2 pawns in this instance, or just have another player take control of our pawn for 4-player 1 Arisen 3 pawn style gameplay, I think that'd be great. Whether full co-op or only in dungeons or some sort of endgame mode, I'd be happy with everything. I want full co-op, but I'll take anything. I do think it's important though that pawns remain a strong focus. That's why I think perhaps it'd be better to do only 2-player co-op, 1 player, 2 players, 2 pawns, because that way you're always going to have pawns there, unless obviously you send your pawns away to play solo. Because they're one of the most unique parts of the game, and I want to see them remaining a big part of it. The open world could do with some improvement too. More roaming monsters, more random events, just more to see and do. Whilst I love Dragon's Dogma, the open world was a little sparse at times, especially compared to certain other games. I do wonder how fast travel should work. Remember launch Dragon's Dogma? Port crystals being the rarest thing in the world? Still, I do like the idea of expanding upon the port crystal idea. Let us place them down, they give us a limit, well, a reasonable limit. Maybe even make it so big settlements and cities have port crystals in them that, once you reach, you can port back to them. And yeah, I think having the Eternal Ferry Stone from the start, or very early on, is probably a good idea too. And I don't really know if it'd work, but I like the idea of having a wagon your party can roll out on, perhaps letting you store excess items and supplies on, but you'd run the risk of things attacking it. Of course, if they had something like this, well, obviously it would need to be faster than just running, and feel seamless and easy to get into and out of. Like, it need to be fast. You know how you get on Torrent in Elden Ring? It's fast, it's quick, it's not cumbersome. It's gotta be like that, but I don't know, I just like the mental image of an Arisen and their pawns just on a wagon rolling down the road somewhere. As for new vocations I'd like to see, well, I wouldn't mind if the Dragon's Dogma Online vocations made it into the game. But either way, I'd like to see a spear vocation and an unarmed vocation. I think those are the two that are kind of missing right now, and I'm not sure if I'd want an entirely new set of vocations, like, get rid of the old ones, have completely new ones, or just have the old ones expanded with one or two new ones. Dragon's Dogma is one of those rare games where almost every vocation is insanely cool, and I enjoy playing. Mage and Sorcerer are really cool, I just don't really enjoy playing them, but I love having them in my party so I can watch them shoot meteors down and cast things like Brontide, Fulmination, whatever it's called. The ice one's probably the coolest looking one too. Finally, what about some predictions concerning the game? Well, I don't even want to speculate about the release date, but I definitely think we might see a few systems in place that were potentially prototyped in Devil May Cry 5, which had network features for one thing. Remember the system where you could stumble across another player going through their level at the same time? I reckon we might get something like that in Dragon's Dogma too. I just don't know how they would implement it. I mean, let's say I'm passing the town of Eternal Bandits in the open world and you're there in your world. Maybe I'd see you in the distance. Maybe we would see each other at a quest board in a town and we could, invite each other to our worlds. I don't know. Or maybe we both get a random event happening, but after we walk away from each other at a certain point, we'd instance out or something. I mean, they could work in some other way, but they have the technology for these networked capabilities now. I seem to recall Dragon's Dogma had wandering pawns on some roads. So, you got some sort of precedence there. It'd be kind of cool to have a random event where, say, I don't know, I find my friend Doug's pawn being attacked by bandits, I help him out, and the next time Doug, I don't know, plays or is resting an inn, his pawn is like, Master, some bandits tried to wreck my Ort. Speaking of DMC5, remember V and his pets? I wonder if that's some sort of prototyping for a new summoner vocation. That would be cool. Beastmaster, maybe? Dragon's Dogma had a lot of really cool monsters, and the idea of using some of their powers, or the monsters themselves, as allies is a really cool idea, I think. You know the monster riding mechanic in Monster Hunter Rise? I wouldn't mind something like that. Naturally, we need a layered armor system, or transmog system too. Dragon's Dogma has some really cool armor, and potential for fashion, but it feels like a struggle. If you want to swap to something cool, you're going to be losing the absurd stats of Bitter Black Isle gear, and yeah, you can still play the game without having those huge stats, but it's a struggle. Goes without saying, their character creation having such a big impact on gameplay should absolutely remain. Tall characters can carry more, short characters can fit places, all that. It might be cool to have things like beast races too. Dragon people, lion people, whatever. But my number one biggest want would be some sort of co-op. What about you? Hopes and fears for Dragon's Dogma 2? Let me know down in the comments.